Good day, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of this season's Masterclass series. So far, we have seen how you can resolve incidents, deliver exceptional onboarding experience for your employees, and also how you can deploy different kinds of changes to your IT environment. Today, we are going to be looking at how you can optimize your IT budgets with the ITAM features available in ServiceDesk Plus. Before I start, let me introduce myself. I am Nisha Ravi and I'll be the trainer for today's session. You can download the handouts for today's masterclass from the left hand side, which contains all the features that we will go over in today's webinar. Before we go ahead, here are a few housekeeping items. As all attendee lines are muted, you can use the questions panel on the left to send us your questions. Also, we have a dedicated Q&A session at the end during which our product experts will answer your queries. You can also be on the lookout for a recording of today's session, which will be sent to your mailbox in the next couple of days. For any other information or if you'd like to share any feedback, feel free to write to my email ID, which is given on your screen, and you can also write to hello@servicedeskplus.com. Right now, it's time for a quick poll. So, post the pandemic, as we all know, organizations across the world have embraced hybrid work model, right? So, in such a circumstance, IT service desk have to manage both hybrid and remote IT assets, right? And this is definitely compounded by many software licenses associated with your assets. So, let us know what the situation is like in your organization by taking part in this quick poll. All right. So I see that most of us do have a hybrid work model, and we face such a situation in our daily work life scenario, right? So this is exactly why we are going to share certain tips and tricks to help you come up with an effective ITAM strategy for your hybrid workspace, and thereby you can optimize your IT budget. With that, let me introduce you to Zilker, which is a fictional company that we use in our masterclass series. Zilker is a data analytics and a consultancy firm, and like most of us, Zilker is also adopting the hybrid work model. And Zilker aims to achieve a few things in this scenario. Zilker wants to manage both its remote and on-premise assets. So as we know that in a hybrid work model, employees might be working from office or they might be working remotely, or it can be a combination of both, right? So in this case, IT assets might definitely cross corporate boundaries and they are no longer confined to a traditional workspace, right? So Zilker wants to manage both their on-premise and remote IT assets. And given that Zilker is managing a lot of software licenses, it wants to sail through its IT asset audits and also stay compliant. And finally, Zilker wants to get a complete picture of its IT infrastructure so that it is able to resolve major incidents on time. But as always, Zilker is finding itself in a major soup. This is because its IT team is relying on legacy tools and spreadsheets to manage and track its IT assets across the enterprise. So, does everything go well for Zilker, or is it an uphill task for them? Let us find all of that in just a bit. So, as I said earlier, Zilker wants to govern its IT assets in a smooth manner. But Zilker has certain loopholes in its ITAM strategy. So, because its IT team is relying on legacy tools, Zilker is struggling to discover and manage all of its IT assets within a single console. And it is unable to track the IT assets that are assigned to its remote employees. And finally, it does not have an accurate picture of its IT asset stock. So, when its asset stock started depleting, this led to a delayed provisioning of assets to its employees, and this led to a very poor onboarding experience. And finally, all of this put together led to very poor business productivity for Zilker. So let's see how, now that we have seen the challenges that Zilker has faced, Let us see how Zilker was able to overcome all these challenges with ServiceDesk Plus. So first off, Zilker was able to discover both its on-premise and remote IT assets with various scanning techniques. And after that, they classified their IT assets and managed the entire life cycle of their assets with visual workflows. And after assigning these assets to their employees, they were also able to issue automated notifications to concerned stakeholders when their IT asset stock went below a certain threshold. Finally, they were also able to troubleshoot their remote IT assets. So now that we have seen the Service Desk Plus framework for setting up for your hybrid workspace, let us see how you can ensure this entire chain of events in action in Service Desk Plus. So this is the asset dashboard from which you get a visual representation and you can analyze your key asset key metrics visually by using bar charts, graphical representation, and so on. So we will talk about this in just a bit. So before discovering IT assets, let's say that Zilker has issued purchase orders and it wants to add these assets to its ITSM solution. So you can do that by going to the purchases module right here and raise a new purchase order. So in a purchase order, you can track different details like the associated site, the vendor details, the shipping and the billing address. You can also capture the product type and the quantity required. And you can also add different details like the sales tax, the additional tax, your shipping costs, and so on. You can also associate a cost center and a general ledger code. So once you issue a purchase order, you can also have a multi-level approval. So you can set up nearly up to 5 stages of approval for a purchase order. And once your purchase order has been approved, you can you can go ahead and start receiving the items as and when it is required. You can also track the associated invoice details from here and the payment details also under the payments tab. So let's say that Zilker wants to receive its items. So to do that, you can go to receive items, select the required product, select the site, and specify the quantity or the number of assets that you would like to receive. So once you do that, the list of received items would be given here, and this will be added to your IT asset database. You can also track the conversations associated with this purchase order and also the history of all the actions that are performed in this purchase order. So now that Zilker has added all the assets to its ITSM solution, so let us find out how Zilker was able to discover and discover the IT assets across its enterprise with different scanning techniques. For that, let us go to Setup, and under Probes and Discovery, you can access the different scanning methods available in ServiceDesk Plus. So for a probe-based scan, you require a probe, right? So probe is essentially an application that you can install in your network, and essentially that would be a server in your network. And this probe will start pinging different IT assets that are there in your network. And this will fetch the details. So to add a probe, you can give the required probe name here and select the associated site. So after adding the probe, you can download the probe from here and use the show key option that is visible here. You can add this key to the probe and execute it. After executing the probe will fetch the data of all the assets in your network. You can also store the credentials for your IT assets under Credential Library. So using these credentials, you can perform remote scans, remote control, and so on for your IT assets. So to create a new credential, you can choose the required credential type here and give the credential details from here. And in addition to probe-based scan, we also have domain scan. So here Zilker has set up domains for its California site as well as New York, right? So Using domain scan, you can scan the different domains that are there across your enterprise. To set up a domain scan, you can select a probe from here and give the domain name. So let's say that you are doing this for the finance department. You can also give the domain controller details here. So a domain controller is essentially a server which is going to host your AD for this particular domain. You can give the login credentials from here, and you can also choose to enable software scan for the IT assets in this particular domain. Apart from domain scan, we also have network scan. So with network scan, you can choose to scan your entire network or a specific range by giving the details here. You can select the required probe from here, and you can scan different IT assets like your Windows machines, your Linux and Mac machines, and so on. You can give the credentials from the credential library, or you can also choose to add new credential details right from here. And similar to domain scans, you can also choose to enable software scan for your Linux, Mac machines, and so on. And in case you are using Microsoft SSCM integration to manage IT assets in your environment, you can integrate Microsoft SSCM with ServiceDesk Plus. To configure the settings, you can give the database host name here, the database name, choose the required authentication mode, and also select the required probe. Now, let's say that uh, as Zilker has embraced the hybrid work model, the IT assets in Zilker have gone beyond the traditional network boundaries. So, as the IT assets are outside your network, a probe might not be able to reach to the IT asset, right? So, you can use a self scan script in ServiceDesk Plus to fetch details of such IT assets. So, under settings, you can go to scan script and download the self scan script in such a machine. You can use the exe file for Windows and the sh files for Linux and Mac machines. And be sure to use the API key that's given here to run the self-scan script. So after executing the self-scan script, the details will be uploaded to the probe machine, and you will be able to fetch the details of such IT assets which lie outside your network. So in addition to all the discovery and scanning methods that we have seen so far, you can also leverage barcode scanning in ServiceDesk Plus. So to do that, you can go to the assets module, and on the left hand accordion menu, you can access barcode scans. You can generate barcodes for new assets, and you can also do the same for existing assets. And in case your vendor has issued barcode scans for assets, you can scan them and fetch the details of those IT assets. So now that we have seen the different scanning techniques and how Zilker was able to discover IT assets across its enterprise, let's find out how Zilker was able to classify these IT assets. So under the assets module, we see a set of classifications for assets, right? So it could be IT assets, virtual machines and virtual hosts. They could be non-IT assets. You also have asset components, asset consumables, and so on. And further, under these classifications, we have granular classifications like access points, iPads, printers, workstations, and so on. Now, this classification is available right out of the box. In case you would like to customize this according to your requirements, you can do that by using the customization menu under setup. And let's say that Zilker wants to group IT assets based on certain conditions. You can do that by using asset groups, which is visible right here. So you can sort assets manually by using static group, or you can sort assets based on certain condition. So let's say that you would like to sort your assets based on the asset state. So let me say that Zilker wants to know the assets that are situated at a remote location. So once you set a certain condition and give the required details like the group name and the grouping type, ServiceDesk Plus will be able to automatically sort assets which satisfy this criteria. So here you can see that a dynamic asset group has been created, and this would list all the assets that satisfy this condition. So after classifying assets, Zilker wanted to manage the entire life cycle of their assets, right? So to do that, you can go to setup, and under automation, you can go to life cycles. ServiceDesk Plus offers life cycles for requests, problems, and assets. So before we see how you can configure a life cycle, let us head over to one such IT asset that Zilker is tracking and managing. So here we see that two transitions, the buttons that are visible here are called transitions. And using transitions, you can move IT assets between different asset states. And you can also guide your technicians to perform standard operations across the entire life cycle of an IT asset. So let's see how you can configure these transitions right now. So going back to asset life cycles, let us open an asset life cycle that Zilker has. So this is a drag and drop canvas where you can drag and drop the IT asset states from here. The white boxes are called the IT asset states, and the green boxes are transitions which connect different IT asset states. And this is a small asset life cycle that Zilker has. So let's say that the asset is in store, and once the asset is assigned to a user, it can be moved to the in-use state. And if the asset becomes faulty, it can be moved to the in repair state. And if the asset is damaged beyond repair, it can definitely move. It can be moved to the dispose state right away. So let's see how you can configure each of these. So you can simply drag and drop the asset states from here. And to configure a transition, each transition has three stages. So one is the before, the during stage, and after stage. In the before stage, you can control the visibility of this transition, and you can specify who can access this transition and when this transition should appear. So you can specify the required organizational roles and technician roles to under the scope, and you can also specify the condition during which this transition must be visible. So you can choose different hardware, software details, and so on. And once this condition is satisfied, this transition will be visible to people with these roles. Now, during the transition, you can mandate different fields and also choose to perform certain field updates. So let's say that Zilker wants to assign this workstation to a certain user. So you can mandate the user field from here, and you can ensure that you have the complete details before you move on to the next phase of your life cycle. In the after stage, you can perform different kinds of actions. So here you can send out a notification, run a custom function, and also trigger a webhook. So here Zilker wants to notify the manager as soon as the IT asset is allocated to the employee. So to do that, you can create a new notification from here. You can choose to notify the required stakeholders, give the required subject from here, and you can also draft the required message from here. We already have a notification for IT director, right? So here you can see that you can draft the required subject from here, and you can use the dollar variable to give out the right details to the right stakeholders. Now that we have seen how a asset life cycle looks like, let's configure one right now. To configure a life cycle, you can go to new life cycles, and let's say that you would like to configure an asset life cycle for keyboards. You can choose the required submodule from here, and this will take us straight to the drag and drop canvas. So let's say that this asset is in store state, and it is going to be used in the office and also at a remote location. So after simply dragging and dropping these IT asset states, you can connect them, and you can configure these transitions. So you can give the transition a required name, and you can configure the different stages of a transition according to your needs. So now that we have seen how you can configure an IT asset lifecycle, let us see this in action. So going back to the asset details page, these two transitions are visible to me as a technician. So let's say that I would like to assign a new user to this IT asset. So, so let me assign it to a specific user, or let me say that I can also assign it to a specific department, or I can assign you can assign it to a user or to a department according to your requirements. So let's say that for now, let us just go with the user, and I'm going to click on save. So here we see that the user details have been updated, right? So this is how an asset lifecycle will help your technicians perform standard actions across the entire lifecycle of an IT asset. Now, after managing the life cycle of an IT asset, Zilker wanted to assign its assets to end users, right? You can automatically assign IT assets to end users using Asset Auto Assign. So, to do that, you can head over to Setup, and under Automation, you can go to Asset Auto Assign. You can enable this automation from here, and once it is enabled, um, based on the last email information that is fetched by ServiceDesk Plus from certain number of consecutive scans, this IT asset will be assigned automatically to the end user. And by doing that, the probe would match the name, the probe would fetch the details of the AD that is situated in a particular domain. And in case you are using Microsoft Azure AD, you can import the login names into specific CSV file, and you can get the required details into the requested additional field, and you can also exclude certain IT assets from this automation. So let's say that Zilker wants to exclude those IT assets with this operating system. So those IT assets which satisfy this condition will automatically be excluded from the asset auto assign automation. So also Zilker wanted to Zilker wanted to assign assets to its end users temporarily. So you can do that by using the asset loan feature. So going back to the assets module, on the left hand accordion menu, we see asset loans right here. You can mark assets loanable by giving the required name of the asset, and let's say that I'm going to loan an iPad. So you can give the required details here and click on save. So you can track the list of all loanable assets in your enterprise right from here. Once you mark an asset as a loanable asset, you can create new asset loans right from here. You can specify the required asset here, and you can give the required duration of the loan, and you can loan the asset to an individual user or a specific department. Once you create an asset loan, you can track the asset loans using loan registry. So from here, you can get to know the status of the loan, when the asset loan is about to expire, and so on. You can also extend the loan from here, and you can add additional assets to your asset loans from here. And Zilker also wanted to track the relationships between assets and its users. To do that, you can go to the asset details page. So let's say that Zilker wants to track the relationships that the Dell Latitude has with its end user. So here under asset relationships, you can track different details like the user to whom this asset is assigned, the components that are attached, and the connected assets, and also the business services. For instance, Ash is assigned to Dell. So and a Dell keyboard is also attached to the Dell laptop, and a mobile is also connected to the Dell laptop, and certain business services like intranet, email, user management, and so on are also connected to the Dell laptop. So with this so from the asset relationships, I can quickly perform an impact analysis or find out a root cause when I'm trying to resolve an issue so that I can make better decisions. I can also track the contracts that are associated with this asset. So here I see that Zilker has an annual maintenance contract with the Dell vendor, right? And I can also track the financials associated with this asset. So I can track the purchase cost, the operational cost, the current book value, and so on. I can also keep a tab on the depreciation of this asset. So you can configure a depreciation from here, and you get to know the depreciation of this asset over a certain period of time. So we saw that we can capture the details of a contract associated with assets, right? So you can get a complete picture of a tightly integrated contracts module by heading over to the contracts module. So under the contracts, we see that Zilker has a maintenance contract with Dell, right? So for every contract, you can track different details like the contract vendor, the contract cost, and whether there is a parent contract associated with this, the site of the contract, and the notifications or when the contract is about to expire, and so on. So, in case you would like to notify concerned stakeholders before the contract is about to expire, you can choose to loop in the required stakeholders here and notify them well in advance. You can also auto renew your contract by sending out notification to the concerned stakeholders and also giving the required period from here. And in addition to tracking the details of a contract, you can also track the assets and the software licenses associated with this contract. You can also track the renewals from here, and you can also track the parent child relationships between different contracts. So here I see that a parent contract has been associated with this contract. I can also track the conversations under every contract. So this is how you can keep different stakeholders informed then and there. I can also track the usage of every contract, and under the history tab, I get to know all the activities that are associated with this contract. So far we have seen how Zilker was able to discover its IT assets, classify them, and manage the entire life cycle of its IT assets, and also assign users to its also assign assets to its end users. Now let's say that Zilker's IT asset stock has depleted, and you can notify concerned stakeholders when the IT asset stock goes below a certain threshold. To do that, you can go to asset replenishment, and here you can see that Zilker is able to track the number of assets that it has for a workstation, for an iMac, and so on. So to configure such timely notifications, you can do that by selecting the required product type. So let's say that I'm going with a workstation. So let's say that Zilker wants to keep a track of, Zilker wants to send out such notifications for HP Envy laptop. So currently we have 25 laptops in store. So you can specify the threshold here below which you can automatically send notifications to concerned stakeholders. So by doing that, you can ensure that you always have the required IT assets, and you can assign IT assets to your end users on time. Finally, we also saw that Zilker wants to perform troubleshoot its remote IT assets, right? So let's say that as an end user, I'm unable to access my VPN, and I'm having some issue associated with that. So I have raised an incident ticket for that, and as a technician in the ticket workspace, I can track the requested details from here, and I can initiate a remote connection from here by inviting the end user through an email. And once the end user accepts this invitation, a remote connection will automatically be initiated, and I can perform the required actions. So coming back, We saw how Zilker was able to use different scanning techniques like barcode scan, domain scan, network scan, and so on to discover IT assets across the enterprise. And they also used asset groups and asset classification to classify their assets in a single database. They manage the entire life cycle of an asset using visual workflows, and they also assign these assets to employees using asset loan, using asset auto assign, and so on. They were also able to send out automatic alerts to concerned stakeholders when their IT asset stock went below a certain threshold. And finally, they were also able to perform remote control operations using Zoho Assist in ServiceDesk Plus Cloud. With that, let us find out how Zilker was able to ace its IT asset audits and also stay compliant. So we saw that in the beginning of the session, we saw that Zilker is managing a lot of software licenses, right? So in that case, Zilker wanted to ensure that they sail through their IT asset audits easily and also stay compliant. But as usual, Zilker has its own perils. So there was a major threat of hefty penalties looming around, and this is because they were non-compliant to the different license agreements that they had. Also, they were unable to track the software asset usage in their organization, and they could not optimize their IT budgets. Finally, they were unable to discern the pattern of their IT spend, so they did not understand whether they were overspending or underspending. So now that we have seen the different roadblocks that Zilker has faced, let's find out how Zilker was able to turn the tables around with Service Desk Plus. After scanning different assets in its organization, Zilker was able to fetch the details of the software licenses, the number of installations, the license agreements, the types, and so on. And they were also able to allocate these underused licenses to different employees. They also tracked their compliance status, and they also understood their IT spend patterns. Now, let us see all of this in action in Service Desk Plus. So going back to the assets module, we see that under software, once Zilker has scanned all the assets in across the enterprise, all the scanned software would be listed here. So you can track the details like the manufacturer, the category, the type of the software, the licensed software, the number of installations allowed, the compliance type, and so on. And for every software, you can track details like the version, the manufacturer, the cost details, and so on. Under license agreements, you can also gather the details of the agreements that are associated with this software, and you can also find out the number of software installations, and you can track the licensed installations as well as the unlicensed ones. So here we see that Zilker has an unlicensed installation, and therefore it is underlicensed. So you can stay compliant by selecting the workstation right here, and you can allocate the license right from here. So once you allocate the license, you can see that Service Desk Plus helps Zilker to stay compliant. And under the licenses tab, you can track different licenses associated with this software, and you can also track the usage of this software. So here we see that Frank and Jendra John are using this software, and this software can also be used by different departments. And under the history tab, you get to know all the operations that are performed. And you can also track when the software was installed, when the software was updated, and when it was uninstalled, and so on. And we can also track the details of different software licenses. So here we see that for every software license, you can track the license type, the license option, the number of installations allowed, and so on. And here we see that for every software license, you can also associate users from here, and you can also allocate this license to different IT assets. You can also track the contracts that are associated with different licenses. And in case you would like to send out timely notifications to your end users, you can also send out alerts to your end users. So for every software license, you can capture the license key from here. And when you're having an agreement with your vendors, you can track the license agreements from here. For every license agreement, you can track different details like the manufacturer details, the agreement number, the expiry date, and so on. You can also track the purchase and invoice details. And in case your license agreement is nearing expiry, you can choose to notify certain users, you can choose to notify certain stakeholders well in advance by specifying the duration right from here. You can you can also track your compliance status by using reports and dashboards. So to do that, let us go to dashboards under home tab. So here we see that asset dashboard is available right out of the box, and you can track the key metrics of your IT assets. So you can find out the number of purchase orders by due date, the Microsoft software license compliance, and you can also find out the product types distribution by different sites. And in addition to asset dashboards, you can also find out the compliance status by using software dashboard. So here you can see that Zilker is able to track its compliance status, the number of unused licenses, the license agreement expiries, and so on. And using reports, you can gather key metrics according to your needs. So we have over 200 plus Kane reports available right out of the box in ServiceDesk Plus. So you can track different kinds of metrics for your IT assets. So for that, you can also track your metrics using visual representations like pie charts, bar charts, and so on. And you get a complete picture and analyze them in depth. And you can also create new custom reports by going to new custom reports, selecting the required module from here. So let's say that you are going to select the assets module. You can also choose the type of the report from here and give the required title. So coming back, we saw how Zilker was able to get the different details like the software licenses, the installations, track the license types, and also allocate licenses to new employees, and also find out the compliance status using software dashboards, and also understand its spend patterns. Now, next up, we are going to see how Zilker was able to get a complete overview of its IT infrastructure using the integrated CMDB module. So as we saw in the beginning of today's session, Zilker wanted to improve its Zilker wanted to resolve its major incidents on time by having a complete picture of its IT infrastructure, right? So let's see what the situation was like in Zilker. They were about to undertake a routine maintenance job, but this affected its central backbone network, which was hosting a critical survey tool that they were using to collect data from their customers. So, being a business critical service, this definitely impacted their productivity, right? So, Zilker suffered a major availability incident, and they did not have a proper overview of their IT infrastructure. So the need of the hour was a complete picture of their IT, and they could do this by using the integrated CMDB module in ServiceDesk Plus. So they were able to track the different CI types. They were also able to map the interdependencies between them, and they were also able to fast track decisions using business views. Now let us see how you can configure all of that and see this in action in ServiceDesk Plus. So let us go to the CMDB module. And here you can see that you can track different CI types. You can mark a CI by choosing the required source module here. So let us go with workstation and also choose the destination CI type. So let this be a Windows workstation. And you can choose the required workstation from the list that is given here. So after marking a CI, you can also map the relationship of every CI. So let's say that Zilker wants to track the relationships associated with a server. So you can map the different relationships from here, and you can see that this server is backed up by another server, and it also supports another workstation. So let's say that Zilker wants to map a business service associated with this server. To do that, you can use custom relationships that are visible on the right hand side. So let's say that this server runs a certain business service, which is an email service. So you can map the relationships between different business critical services, between different teams, your critical CIs, and so on. So, so after mapping the relationship that at a CI level, you can also track the different business views that Zilker has. So going to business views, Zilker was able to get a complete picture of all the interdependencies that are involved. So here, let's say that this email service is this email service runs on this server, and and the different departments like HR, facilities, IT, payroll are dependent on this server. So there are different teams that are using this email service, and you can track the different uh, business critical teams, the CIs that are involved, and so on. You can also track the number of requests, problems, changes, and releases associated with DCI. So let's say that when I'm performing an impact analysis, I'll be able to make a well informed decision and find out the root cause of a certain problem, or I can also plan my changes better. So, coming back, we saw how Zilker was able to create CI types, create interdependencies between them, and also improve their decision making with business views. Before we wind up today's session, let's have a quick recap. We saw that Zilker used different discovery techniques like barcode scan, probe-based scan, domain-based scan, and network scan to scan different assets across its enterprise. And we also saw that Zilker was able to classify its asset, manage the entire life cycle of the assets using asset lifecycle, and also assign these assets to end users using asset loans by tracking the relationship between them, and so on. We also saw that Zilker was able to keep a tab on its compliance status and also optimize its IT spend. Finally, we also saw that Zilker was able to get a complete picture of its IT infrastructure and also make well-informed decisions by associating their CMDB with incidents, problems, and changes. To learn more about ServiceDesk Plus, you can go through our admin guide and also have a look at the latest features that we have released in our release notes. You can watch our previous masterclass videos on our YouTube channel, and you can interact with your peers on Pitstop, which is a community from ManageEngine. You can also contact the support folks using the URL that's given on your screen. You can also write to us at hello@servicedeskplus.com. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. I hope that the tips and tricks that we have shared today will help you come up with an effective ITAM strategy and also optimize your IT budgets. Thank you.